Hello everyone, my name is Treasure Ife and I am your instructor for the 3D animation crash course in Blender. In this particular video, we're going to be taking a brief overview of the course that you'll be taking. We're going to talk about the structure of the course, why it is structured the way it is, and also what you will learn. So please enjoy. This course has been specifically crafted for those who are interested in 3D but are not really sure where to start. Or maybe you've tried 3D before briefly and you got overwhelmed, you ran away, so you want to try again. This course is specifically for you. If you are confused about where to start in 3D, you are not alone, because in reality there is no one path to 3D. The 3D world is very, very big. There are many different departments or many different specializations in the 3D field. And that can be very confusing if you are looking at them separately. But one way of making it a bit easier is if you see it as a big town, if you can conceptualize the world of 3D as a big town, and not just a big town, maybe even a castle. And you imagine that each and every one of these specializations are their own districts in the 3D world, it becomes a bit more easier to grasp. So as a result of that, there are different entrances into this world of 3D. Depending on what you want to do. So if you want to go into modeling, you can take the modeling entrance or the modeling part into 3D. If you want to go into material texturing, you can take the texturing part. If you want to go into lighting, take the lighting part, rendering, same thing, compositing, and all that and all that. So depending on what, the bottom line is that there is no one path to 3D. Depending on what exactly you want to learn, there are different ways to enter into the 3D field. This is both an advantage and a disadvantage in the sense that it can be very overwhelming. However, we will be taking the animation parts. So we'll be entering into the 3D field through animation, which means that our priorities will be different. So the priority of the animation part is making things move. And that's what we're going to be focusing on throughout our lesson. However, we're going to be doing this with what I call a generalist approach. What do I mean by that? I mean that even though we are going to be going into the animation part, which is where we're primarily based on, we are still going to touch a little bit on some of these other districts or specializations in 3D. However, we are still rooted in animation, which means that our priority is first and foremost making things move. And that is what we are going to do. So this course has been divided into chapters with a bit of a prologue and an epilogue. However, the thing about these chapters is that with each chapter, you are going to make a project. So why is it structured this way? I realized that multiple projects will make you a bit more familiar with the 3D software. So with the more familiar you are with it, the more comfortable you'll be with using it, because if we spend the entire duration of the course on just one project, you might lose track of what you are doing, and going back to the software to start an entirely new project might feel intimidating. So also we want to do this to maintain engagement, because if you spend too long on one project, it can get boring. But if we're spending it on multiple projects, it can be a lot more engaging. And finally, we are structuring it this way so you can have more works behind your belt, so increase your work volume. And there's a saying that quantity leads to quality. So the more projects you do, the more experience you will be, and also you have more stuff to show your friends. So before we get into the software itself, we'll first start out with a prologue, which is going to be a theoretical exploration of what exactly 3D is and what exactly 2D is. We're going to start with that, and then we're going to go into the software that we're using. Our software of choice is Blender. I'm going to take you through installing Blender, into navigating the UI, because UI might seem a little bit complex for a beginner. We'll talk about how to interact with objects in Blender, how to add objects, how to delete objects, how to scale them, move them around. Then we'll touch a little bit on the materials and rendering. And by the end, your first project is going to be how to create your first 3D render in Blender. Then we're going to go straight into animation. No wasting of time there. We are going to start out with an exploration of a few animation concepts that you will need to understand animation. And then not long after that, we're going to go straight into how to animate objects in Blender. Then you're going to create your first 3D animation. That's going to be your second project. Then we're going to go into modeling in chapter 3. We'll start out with an exploration of some concepts of modeling that will help you. and then we'll show you how to model objects in Blender. By the end of this chapter, you'll be creating your first 3D model, and we'll also make a small animation out of it. Then we're going to go into our final chapter, which is going to be all about creating your first 3D commercial in Blender. During this time, we're going to have a brief. We're going to break down that brief, talk about some concepts, scene management, importing assets. We're just going to go through an entire workflow of creating a 3D commercial. And we'll wrap up the project with some closing advice, where to go next, where to learn next, further learning resources, and advice on breaking into the industry. So before we proceed, who am I? My name is Treasure Ife. I am a 3D animator. I specialize mostly in short-form animated projects like 3D commercials, trailers, adverts, and product animation. I'm also a storyboard artist. I make my storyboards and animatics in Blender. So yes, you can do that, but because of the scope of our course, we will not be covering that. However, I will be leaving some resources for those who are interested at the end of the course. And finally, I'm also a narrative designer for films and games. So bottom line is, you are in good hands. So that's all for the overview of our 3D animation crash course. In our next lesson, we'll be going into 3D, explaining what exactly is 3D and demystifying some concepts in the 3D space. So please check it out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned.
Enjoy all these premium courses in this channel for free.